Dina. How are you today?
Hi, Lori. I am so good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I just wanted to introduce Dena Otto. She's a sales and marketing manager at Madonna Meadows Senior Community, and she's going to talk about being proactive versus reactive when it comes to senior housing options. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and enlighten us.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for having me today. It's fun to be of any assistance that I can be if people are looking for that direction. I have been in long-term care for over 30 years in various
Oh, you're
forms.
not that old.
I am. Oh my gosh. My knees tell the story. My knees wake up in the morning and they tell me the
Oh, yeah, I
story.
understand that.
um, and I have done many kinds of positions. My background primarily is nursing home administration and assisted living administration. For the last almost 3 years, I've had the honor of working in sales and marketing, which has been a very good combination of all of my backgrounds together. And so here I am to talk about the pros and cons of being proactive versus reactive.
And I imagine you see this all the time. People
Yeah,
just not knowing what to do and when and how and
Yep, it's very common for people to be, if I'm the first community they're reaching out to, I'm happy to walk them through the entire process because if I'm the first call that they're making, they often don't even know the other resources available to help answer those questions. And
mm,
so I not only talk about the community where I work, but all of the resources and also all of the different options available in Rochester because it is our goal to have them make the best choice.
right.
And sometimes we see that people make their own determination to come and explore assisted living on their own. Those are who
Mhm,
I would call proactive. And they're making the decision to take the burden off of themselves and their families,
mhm.
and during a time when they're not in emergency mode. Um, but there are all kinds of various forms that I see, and sometimes people have unexpected things happen. And so there's no choice but to be reactive. It just
Mhm.
means that there's a little bit more urgency in the process. And so it ends up that there might be some shortcuts along the way, and it might not be as smooth.
Right. I teach a class on senior housing options at Community Ed and 125 Live, and I'm just so proud of the people that are in the class, because they're
Yes,
so proactive and a lot of it's they're saying they want to make their decision. They don't want their kids to make it for them. I
exactly.
think that's great.
Absolutely. And, the outcome is often similar, but the journey is what can really vary.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people are coming to look at what options are available, I think probably the very first thing that they should explore would be, what level of care are you looking for?
Oh,
Most people don't understand independent apartments that don't have any services versus independent living that's on a senior campus with services versus assisted living versus memory care versus skilled nursing.
mm-hmm.
And since I've worked in all of those, I'm able to help walk them through. So I'm always honored when I get that first phone call, because assisted living and memory care is what I work with at this community, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that that's the right choice for everybody. And so exploring what the level of care that they're in search of is probably the step one. And I would
Mm-hmm.
say to go along with that, really would be anticipate your needs in the next 6 months. If you can see into the future and guess what your needs might be in the next 6 months, so that you're not looking at another transition sooner than
Mm-hmm.
later. So kind of anticipate that, pull your resources, talk to your healthcare professionals, talk to your neighbors, talk to your family, talk to the people that see you the most and the ones that help you, because they're going to tell you they're probably going to be very happy to tell you what they're doing for you and what you might need help with. So,
Oh, yes. Absolutely. We did that for my mom.
yeah. And so, knowing the level of care and then researching where those levels of care are located. And
Hmm.
then, the cost is another big factor, right? And I think when people are exploring options and they're looking at the cost, they really need to dig in because every community is different. And in Rochester, we all work together. So I actually have pricing for everybody. They have pricing for everybody. All the communities know that. And that's why it's nice to have that, is because we know what all the different options can be. For instance, here at my community at Madonna Meadows, our rent is all inclusive because it includes the meals, it includes housekeeping, it includes laundry, it includes cable, Wi-Fi, and a landline. And then there's a level of care. But at some communities, you may have a cost for cable. You might have a meal plan that is tacked on. It might not include any housekeeping at all. And so every community can really vary on those costs. So it's very important to know when you're given a number, what does that include?
Okay, so it'd probably be good if the people that are interviewing the communities, number one, interview several of them
Yes.
and bring a checklist with them so that they can ask the questions and make sure they get all the answers that they need.
Yep, exactly. And some families even make an Excel spreadsheet and have it all documented to
Mhm.
compare right down the line. And then they'll give you feedback. So it's actually very helpful. And when people select a different community, I often will ask, can you please explain why you chose that? Is it the amenities here? Is it the services? Is it the price? And that way we can all kind of keep track of who has what and be able to speak to each family about what their preferences are and
Okay,
guide them to the place that has that.
right.
And then I think probably, the cost of care gets added on as well. Some places, such as Charterhouse, includes the care right in their assisted living cost. That is the only one that does that in Rochester that I know of. Everybody else has costs separated from their rent because that is the one expense that can really vary individually.
I'll
And
bet.
so and so understanding what that looks like is really critical as to the final outcome of pricing. And then another good question for cost is, how much are your annual increases typically? And I think probably the industry standard is probably 3 to 5%. I think that's probably the lingo we all use, but that
Okay.
can vary sometimes. I know here at Meadows we had a 10% increase in the last few years back, because we were kind of behind the market rate a little bit. Um, but like for instance, Madonna Meadows is not January, it's July for our price increases. And so just kind of knowing what their history is on rent increases and when those will happen, because they will happen.
Okay. Nothing goes
Also,
down.
huh?
Nothing goes down.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Usually that's not the direction that it takes.
Nope.
um, the other thing to go along with costs is, if this is part of their equation, who accepts elderly waiver in their communities? Because not everybody is even aware that that's a thing. They don't know that it is kind of comparable to Medicaid and how the application process goes, who accepts it, and what are the requirements before elderly waiver goes into effect. And those vary campus to campus to campus.
Okay.
And that's a big question to make sure if it's applicable. Not everybody is worried about that, but
Can you explain that a little bit more, what elderly waiver is?
yes, absolutely. So when a person gets down to $3,000 in assets, typically they have already applied for Medicaid, which then converts to elderly waiver and through the county. And what would happen is that once somebody converts to elderly waiver, their income then goes to the building and the state will pick up the rest of the fees. They get to keep a limited amount of money out of that to live on, of course.
Okay.
And so it's basically subsidized by the state. And
And
so,
do they have to pay into a community for X amount of years and before they're eligible for elderly waiver?
in some communities, that is the case. It used to be that case here at Madonna Meadows. Last January, there was actually an increase in the reimbursement for elderly waiver in Minnesota.
Oh,
And
good.
so, yep, so we were able to open the doors up to not have a limit on the elderly waiver.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have studio apartments, it's a little bit easier because
Right.
the variance is less between private pay rates and elderly waiver rates. But it's very common to have a 2-year private pay requirement before converting
Okay.
to elderly waiver. So that's a very important question to ask if that's part of the equation in the future. And there are some campuses that will not accept it at all.
Okay. So
So
basically, can they live there indefinitely on
as long
elderly
as they,
waiver?
yep, as long as we can meet their needs in the level of care.
Okay.
And so every assisted living in Minnesota would have a document that they could refer to tell you exactly what kind of cares can be done at each
Okay.
community.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Dina. This has been so informative and thank you for your time. And we will see you later.
Well, thank you and have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.